I'm Valeria, 28 years old, and 6 months ago, my boyfriend Justin proposed. We planned the perfect engagement party at Boston's finest venue. Since I was 12, my parents promised me a $40,000 wedding fund for my special day. Everything seemed picture perfect until they grabbed the microphone that night. I never imagined they would betray me so publicly, or that I would have already outmaneuvered them. If you're watching this from a place where family betrayal feels all too familiar, hit like and subscribe as I take you through how my picture-perfect engagement celebration turned into the night I learned blood doesn't always mean loyalty. I grew up in Brookline, an affluent suburb just outside of Boston. My parents, Richard and Diana Thompson, were the epitome of upper-middle-class success. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, while Mom managed a high-end boutique in Back Bay. Our home was a stunning colonial with perfectly manicured gardens that Mom insisted on maintaining herself despite her busy schedule. It was important to the Thompsons that everything appeared flawless from the outside. From an early age, I understood the importance of appearances in our family. Sunday dinners meant pressed clothes, perfect manners, and conversations about achievements. Report cards were framed if they contained straight A's. Piano recitals were mandatory, even though I had little musical talent. Everything in our household revolved around how others perceived us. When my sister Natalie was born 4 years after me, something shifted in our family dynamic. She arrived with a full head of blonde curls that matched my mother's, while I had inherited my father's straight brown hair. It may seem trivial, and it became the first of many distinctions that would grow between us. Natalie quickly became the family's golden child. When I brought home an A-, my parents would nod with approval, but mention room for improvement. When Natalie achieved the same grade years later, they celebrated with ice cream and praised her exceptional effort. When I won second place in the state debate championship they attended, but left early due to a scheduling conflict. When Natalie placed third in a local dance competition, they threw a party and invited the extended family. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. My accomplishments were expected, while Natalie's were extraordinary. My setbacks were disappointments, while hers were learning opportunities. I grew accustomed to being held to a higher standard while simultaneously receiving less recognition. When I turned 12, my parents established what they called my wedding fund. It happened on my birthday with the whole family gathered around the dining table after cake. "Valeria," my father announced, holding an envelope adorned with a silver bow. "Your mother and I have decided it's time to start planning for your future." He handed me the envelope with ceremonial gravitas. Inside was a bank statement showing a new savings account with $5,000. "This is the beginning of your wedding fund," my mother explained, her perfectly manicured hand resting on my shoulder. "By the time you're ready to get married, this will grow to $40,000. Every proper young woman deserves a beautiful wedding." My father nodded solemnly. "A proper wedding shows the world our family's standing," he added. "The Thompsons have standards to maintain." From that moment forward, my wedding fund became a strange fixture in our family tradition. Each year on my birthday, my father would show me the updated statement tracking its growth through deposits and interest. It was presented as a generous gift, but carried the weight of expectation. The message was clear: this money represented my parents' vision for my future, one that aligned with their social aspirations. While other girls my age dreamed about careers or travel, I found myself contemplating flower arrangements and venue options. The wedding fund became a tangible symbol of my parents' approval, something I both treasured and resented. Years passed, and I graduated from Boston University with a degree in marketing. I secured a job at a digital advertising agency downtown and began building my own life. I dated occasionally, but never found anyone who seemed worth introducing to my particular family dynamics. Then 3 years ago, everything changed when I met Justin Maxwell at a charity auction for the Boston Children's Hospital. He was volunteering as an auctioneer, his infectious enthusiasm and sharp wit captivating the entire room. I was there representing my agency, which had donated marketing services as an auction item. Justin spotted me bidding on a weekend getaway package and approached me during intermission. Planning an escape, he asked with a warm smile that reached his kind blue eyes. More like planning to donate it back if I win, I admitted, though a getaway does sound tempting. We exchanged numbers that night, and within a week we were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. Justin was different from anyone I had dated before. As a pediatric nurse, he had a compassionate heart and a genuine nature that felt refreshing after growing up in a world of appearances. He listened intently when I spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and never seemed concerned with status or impressions. Our relationship progressed naturally. After a year, we moved into an apartment together in Cambridge. After 2, we were discussing marriage in theoretical terms. And 6 months ago, on the anniversary of our first date, Justin proposed with his grandmother's ring during a sunset sail in Boston Harbor. "Valeria Thompson," he said, kneeling somewhat precariously on the gently rocking boat. "You've shown me what it means to be brave, kind, and authentic in a world that often values the opposite. I want to spend my life growing alongside you, supporting each other through whatever comes our way. Will you marry me?" I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the evening floating on both water and happiness, making plans for our future together. When I called my parents the next morning to share the news, their response was cordial but controlled. "How wonderful," my mother said with measured enthusiasm. "Justin is certainly a steady choice." "Have you thought about timing?" my father asked immediately. "The wedding fund is approaching maturity." Despite their lukewarm reaction, I was determined to stay positive. Justin and I began preliminary wedding planning, discussing potential venues and rough guest counts. The $40,000 fund would allow us to have the celebration we wanted while still putting money aside for our future. Little did I know that forces were already in motion that would turn our engagement into something entirely unexpected. The first hint that something might be amiss came 3 months after our engagement when Natalie's smoothie shop business filed for bankruptcy. She had opened it a year earlier with money our parents had given her as a business investment, roughly $30,000. The shop had beautiful decor, premium ingredients, and absolutely no business plan. Natalie had never worked in food service or studied business, but our parents had encouraged her entrepreneurial spirit anyway. Around the same time, Natalie's divorce from her husband of 2 years was finalized. Trevor had been a charming pharmaceutical sales rep who swept her off her feet, then swept half her savings into his pocket before leaving her for his regional manager. The divorce had been messy and expensive. Suddenly, my parents' attention shifted entirely to Natalie's crises. Sunday dinners became strategy sessions for her next move. My mother spent days helping Natalie pack up her luxury apartment that she could no longer afford. My father made numerous phone calls to his contacts trying to secure her interviews for jobs she wasn't qualified for. Amid all this, whenever I brought up wedding plans, my parents' enthusiasm seemed to diminish further. "Do you really need a seated dinner for 100 people?" my mother asked during one conversation. "Your cousin Melissa had a lovely brunch reception." "These venue prices are highway robbery," my father commented when I showed him the options we were considering. "Have you thought about the Knights of Columbus Hall? It has perfectly adequate space." Their suggestions were always framed as practical advice, but represented a dramatic shift from the proper wedding they had promised me for years. Whenever I gently reminded them about the wedding fund, they would acknowledge it with strained smiles and quick subject changes. Justin noticed their behavior too. "Is it just me, or are your parents backpedaling on their wedding support?" he asked one evening as we reviewed venue options at our kitchen table. "They're just distracted with Natalie's situation," I said, though I was beginning to have my own doubts. "Once things settle down, they'll be more engaged." But things didn't settle down. At a family dinner the following week, my Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister, pulled me aside while I was helping with dessert in the kitchen. "Valeria, honey," she said in a hushed tone, glancing toward the dining room to ensure we were alone. "I don't want to overstep, but have you checked on your wedding account lately?" "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening with sudden anxiety. "Just a feeling," she said, squeezing my arm. "Family patterns tend to repeat themselves, and your mother and father have always had a certain way of handling money when it comes to your sister. Better to be informed." Before I could press her for more details, My mother swept into the kitchen and gave Margaret a sharp look. "Are you two gossiping or bringing out the tiramisu?" she asked with forced lightness. Later that evening, as I was gathering my coat to leave, I overheard my parents in my father's study, their voices rising, despite obvious attempts to keep the conversation private. "We don't have a choice, Diana," my father was saying. "She needs the help now." "I know that," my mother responded, sounding frustrated. "But we promised Valeria. It's been the plan for 16 years. Plans change. Valeria and Justin both have good jobs. They'll figure it out. Natalie has nothing right now. Valeria will never forgive us. She doesn't need to know the whole amount. We can replace some of it before she needs it." I slipped away before they could discover me eavesdropping, my mind racing. On the drive home, I told Justin what I had heard. "You need to check that account," he said immediately. His usual easygoing expression replaced with concern. "If your name is on it, you have every right to know what's happening with your money." "I can't just check it," I protested weakly. "That would mean I don't trust them." "Val, based on what you just told me, do you trust them?" His gentle question cut through my denial. The following weekend, I had lunch with Natalie at a cafe near her new apartment, which was mysteriously in one of Boston's pricier neighborhoods, despite her financial troubles. She arrived wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a bag I recognized as costing well over $1,000. Throughout our meal, she asked unusual questions about my wedding plans. How much was our venue deposit? When did we need to pay vendors? Had I looked at the wedding fund recently? "Mom and Dad haven't mentioned any specifics," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about how everything works," she said with a shrug. "I might want to get married again someday, you know, once I'm over Trevor the Terrible." That same evening, Justin's friend Marcus, who worked at a local bank, came over for dinner. As the conversation drifted to wedding planning, Marcus mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Just make sure you keep an eye on any joint accounts," he said casually. "I see so many cases at the bank where family financial situations get messy around weddings and big life events. You wouldn't believe how common financial manipulation is, even in the closest families." The next morning, after a nearly sleepless night, I finally logged into my bank account. Though I hadn't checked the wedding fund in years, assuming my parents were handling it as promised, I still had the login information from when they had set it up in my name. What I saw made my stomach drop. The account that should have contained nearly $40,000 now showed a balance of just over $15,000. More than half of my wedding fund was gone. With shaking hands, I called my parents. They answered on speakerphone, their voices overly cheerful when I identified myself. "I just checked my wedding account," I said, skipping any preamble. "There's money missing." A long pause followed before my father cleared his throat. "We were going to talk to you about that, sweetheart. There's been a temporary reallocation of some of those funds." Temporary reallocation," I repeated incredulously. "Natalie needed some help getting back on her feet," my mother interjected. "We used part of the wedding fund as a loan to her. She'll pay it back before your wedding, of course." "How is she going to pay back $25,000? I asked. "She doesn't even have a job." "She's interviewing for a position at your father's friend's company," my mother said quickly. "The salary would be more than adequate to repay the loan in time for your wedding next year." "We're still contributing the promised amount," my father added. "Just think of it as a brief delay for some of the funds." After hanging up, I immediately called Justin, who came home early from his shift to find me sitting shell-shocked at our kitchen table. "They took the money," I said simply when he walked in. "For Natalie." Justin sat beside me and took my hands in his. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know what I can do," I replied. "It's their money ultimately. They just promised it to me." "Let's talk to someone who knows about this stuff," he suggested. "My cousin Alicia is a financial advisor. She can tell us where we stand legally." The next day, we met Alicia at her office downtown. After explaining the situation, she asked a series of clarifying questions about the account. "Is the account solely in your name?" she asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "They set it up that way when I was 12, though they've been the ones making deposits." And you're now 28, correct? When I nodded, she continued. Then legally, the money in that account belongs to you, not your parents. If they're withdrawing funds without your consent, that's actually illegal. Even though they're the ones who put the money in, I asked, surprised. Once money is deposited in an account under your name, it legally belongs to the account holder regardless of who made the deposit, Alicia explained. It's essentially a completed gift at that point. They can't legally take it back without your permission. So what should I do? I asked. If you want to protect what's left, you should transfer it to a new account that only you control, she advised. They've already demonstrated they're willing to access the account without your knowledge or consent. Justin and I discussed the situation extensively that evening. The thought of moving the money felt both empowering and terrifying. On one hand, it was legally my money, and I had every right to protect it. On the other, I knew it would create significant conflict with my parents. What if they're telling the truth about replacing it? I asked Justin as we lay in bed that night, sleep eluding both of us. Do you believe they will? He asked gently. I thought about my parents' history, their pattern of prioritizing Natalie, their recent evasiveness, and the secret withdrawal they had only acknowledged when confronted. No, I finally admitted. I don't think they'll replace it. Then I think you have your answer, Justin said, holding me close as tears slipped down my cheeks. The next day, I went to a different bank across town and opened a new account in my name only. The process of transferring the remaining $15,000 took only minutes, but the weight of what I was doing felt enormous. I was not just moving money. I was acknowledging that I couldn't trust my parents, a truth I had been avoiding for most of my life. As the bank officer handed me the confirmation slip, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The money was now secure, but the cost was the shattering of an illusion I had clung to despite years of evidence to the contrary. My parents gave no indication they knew about the transfer. Our interactions continued normally, with them asking about wedding plans and making occasional comments about how Natalie was turning things around with their help. I maintained the facade, not revealing that I had taken control of what remained of my fund. Meanwhile, Justin and I adjusted our wedding plans to account for the reduced budget, opting for a spring wedding instead of fall to secure better pricing, choosing a Sunday instead of a Saturday, and scaling back some of our more elaborate ideas. We were determined to create a beautiful day that reflected our values with or without the full funding my parents had promised. As our engagement party approached, the tension within me grew. I hadn't decided whether to confront my parents about the money at the party or continue maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. Justin supported whatever I wanted to do, but reminded me that the party should be a celebration, not a battleground. We'll have plenty of time to address the money situation after the party, he reasoned. Let's just enjoy having our friends and family together to celebrate our engagement. I agreed, pushing aside my anxiety and focusing on creating a wonderful evening. Little did I know that my parents had plans of their own for our celebration. The engagement party was held at Rosewood Gardens, a beautiful venue overlooking the Charles River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the Boston skyline. I had chosen a color scheme of deep burgundy and gold, with elegant floral arrangements of roses and lilies adorning each table. Crystal champagne flutes sparkled under warm lighting, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. I wore a cream-colored cocktail dress with delicate beadwork that caught the light when I moved. Justin looked handsome in a charcoal suit with a burgundy tie that matched our decor. When he saw me putting the finishing touches on my makeup in our apartment, he had whispered, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," and the sincerity in his eyes had momentarily washed away my anxiety about the evening ahead. Guests began arriving at 7, filling the space with congratulations and warm embraces. Justin's parents, Robert and Elaine Maxwell, arrived early to help with last-minute details. They had welcomed me into their family with genuine warmth from our first meeting, a stark contrast to my parents' lukewarm reception of Justin. "This place looks spectacular, Valeria," Elaine said, squeezing my hand. "You two deserve every happiness." Robert nodded in agreement. "We couldn't be prouder to be gaining you as a daughter," he added, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. My parents arrived precisely on time, my father in an expensive suit, and my mother in a designer dress that probably cost more than our entire appetizer budget. They made a show of embracing me and shaking Justin's hand, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. "The venue is lovely, darling," my mother said, her gaze sweeping critically around the room. "Though I'm surprised you didn't book the Atherton Club like we suggested." "This place has better views," I replied, refusing to be baited into a discussion about venues I couldn't afford after they had taken most of my wedding fund. Natalie arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a red dress that bordered on inappropriate for an engagement party. I noticed she was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet I hadn't seen before and carrying a clutch that matched her new designer shoes. For someone supposedly in financial crisis, she looked remarkably well-funded. "Sis," she exclaimed, air-kissing both my cheeks. "Everything looks so cute. Are those real flowers?" Before I could respond, she spotted someone across the room and flitted away, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. As the evening progressed, I began to notice strange undercurrents. My father was drinking more heavily than usual, emptying his whiskey glass at an alarming rate. My mother kept having hushed conversations with various family members, their eyes occasionally darting toward Justin and me before quickly looking away. Most disturbing was Natalie's smug expression whenever our gazes met across the room. She had the look of someone keeping a delicious secret, a cat who had not only caught the canary, but had arranged for an audience to witness the event. Justin's college roommate David, now a successful architect, gave the first toast of the evening. "To finding that rare person who sees you completely and loves you anyway," he said, raising his glass. "Justin and Valeria, you two have something special. Never lose sight of that." My best friend Sophia followed with a touching speech about witnessing our relationship bloom. "Valeria deserves someone who values her inherent worth," she said, her words striking a chord in me. "In Justin, she's finally found that person." For a brief moment, surrounded by friends who genuinely cared for us, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps the evening would proceed without incident. Perhaps my parents would give a generic pleasant toast and keep their financial machinations private. Perhaps we could preserve the appearance of family harmony for one more night. That hope evaporated when I noticed my father conferring with the event coordinator, pointing to the microphone setup. My mother joined them, her expression a mixture of determination and rehearsed sympathy. Natalie positioned herself near the front of the room, her phone ready as if preparing to capture a particularly noteworthy moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator announced, "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson would like to say a few words about their daughter and future son-in-law." The room quieted as my father took the microphone, my mother standing beside him, with a practiced smile. Justin sensed my sudden tension and took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "First, Catherine and I would like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Valeria and Justin's engagement." My father began, his voice carrying the polished tone he used for business presentations. "As parents, there's nothing quite like seeing your child find their person." He continued with a few anecdotes about my childhood, mentioning my determination and independence in a way that almost sounded like genuine pride. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax slightly, thinking perhaps I had misread the situation. Then came the pivot. "While this is certainly an evening of celebration," he said, his tone shifting subtly, "Catherine and I have decided this is also the appropriate time to make an important family announcement." My stomach dropped. Justin's hand tightened around mine. "As many of you know, we established a wedding fund for Valeria when she was 12 years old," my father continued. "It was intended to give her the wedding of her dreams when the time came." A murmur of approval rippled through the guests who were unaware of what was coming next. "However," my father paused dramatically, "family circumstances sometimes require flexibility and sacrifice. While we've always planned for Valeria's special day, we've made the decision as a family to redirect the $40,000 wedding fund to help Natalie recover from her recent hardships." The room fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as dozens of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to pity to morbid curiosity. Natalie's face bore a triumphant smile as she recorded the moment on her phone. My mother stepped forward to take the microphone. We know Valeria and Justin understand the importance of family supporting family in times of need, she said smoothly. Natalie's business setback and difficult divorce have left her in a vulnerable position that requires immediate family intervention. The suffocating weight of public humiliation pressed down on me as I struggled to maintain my composure. Years of conditioning to never make a scene, to always present a unified family front, warred with the white-hot anger burning through my chest. Justin's parents exchanged horrified glances. Sophia's mouth had dropped open in disbelief. My cousin Jake actually booed before his wife elbowed him into silence. Valeria and Justin both have successful careers, my father continued, regaining the microphone. They'll manage just fine while this support will help Natalie rebuild her life. We're confident everyone understands this is the right decision for our family at this time. I felt suspended in a terrible moment of paralysis, torn between my lifelong habit of acquiescing to my parents' decisions and the newfound strength I had been developing with Justin. The room seemed to be waiting for my reaction. 100 faces turned expectantly toward the spectacle my parents had created. And then Justin did something that changed everything. Justin gently released my hand and stood up. With a calm I couldn't fathom in that moment, he walked to where my father stood with the microphone. The room went completely silent as he approached, tension hanging thick in the air. "Mr. Thompson," Justin said, his voice steady but carrying clearly through the room. "May I say a few words as well?" My father looked startled, clearly not expecting any challenge to his announcement. After a moment's hesitation, he reluctantly handed Justin the microphone, stepping back with a stiff smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us tonight," Justin began, his warm voice immediately changing the energy in the room. "Valeria and I are truly blessed to have such wonderful friends and family surrounding us." He looked directly at me, his eyes full of love and reassurance. "I want to take a moment to thank Richard and Diana for raising such an incredible daughter. Valeria is the most honest, hardworking, and loving person I know. Those qualities don't develop by accident." I watched my parents shift uncomfortably, unsure where Justin was going with this. "When you love someone," Justin continued, "you want to protect them from harm. You want to shield them from pain and disappointment. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand beside them while they face difficult truths." He turned slightly to address my parents directly. "I respect you both as Valeria's parents. However, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the wedding fund that needs to be clarified for everyone's sake." My father stepped forward as if to reclaim the microphone, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm, her eyes darting nervously around the room full of witnesses. Something in me shifted then. The years of appeasing, of accepting less than I deserved, of prioritizing family peace over my own well-being, suddenly felt like a weight I could no longer bear. I stood and walked to Justin's side, drawing strength from his presence. "May I asked quietly, gesturing to the microphone. Justin handed it to me with a supportive nod. I took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces before me. "I want to be very clear about something," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "There was never a family decision to redirect my wedding fund. My parents made that decision unilaterally without consulting me." Murmurs spread through the crowd as I continued. "What's more, they've already withdrawn $25,000 from that account over the past few months, again, without my knowledge or consent." My father's face reddened with anger while my mother's complexion went pale. Natalie had stopped recording and was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "What my parents didn't know," I said, feeling a strange calm descend over me, "is that I discovered their withdrawals weeks ago, and since the account was legally in my name, I've already moved the remaining $15,000 to a new account they cannot access." The room erupted in reactions. Someone in the back let out a low whistle. Justin's college friends broke into spontaneous applause. My Aunt Margaret actually shouted, "Good for you, girl." My father pushed forward, his face contorted with indignation. "That money was a gift we were providing for your wedding. You had no right to move it without our permission." Justin reclaimed the microphone. Actually, sir, once you deposited money into an account in Valeria's name, it legally became her property. We consulted a financial advisor to confirm this. She had every right to protect what remained of her fund. You stole from your own sister, Natalie cried out dramatically. I needed that money. No, Natalie, I replied, my voice steady. I protected what was left of what was promised to me for 16 years. The $25,000 that's already gone is your concern, not the remaining amount. My mother stepped forward, attempting to salvage the situation. Perhaps we can discuss this privately as a family, she suggested tightly. This isn't the appropriate venue for such conversations. I disagree, I countered. You chose to make a public announcement about redirecting my wedding fund. You chose to humiliate me in front of my friends and future in-laws. You don't get to decide now that the response should be private. Aunt Margaret moved to stand beside me, her presence a surprising comfort. Diana, this isn't the first time you and Richard have pulled something like this, she said, addressing my mother directly. You did the same thing with the college fund for our nephew Thomas, giving it to Natalie for her first car and apartment. This revelation caused another ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Other family members began sharing their own observations about the pattern of favoritism toward Natalie over the years. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing years of carefully suppressed observations and grievances. The party had clearly divided into factions. My parents' country club friends clustered together, looking uncomfortable. Extended family members seemed torn between loyalty to my parents and discomfort with their actions. Justin's family and our mutual friends stood firmly in our corner, their support palpable. I think, Justin said, gently reclaiming the microphone one last time, that Valeria and I are going to bring this evening to an early close. We thank you all for coming to celebrate our engagement. Despite unexpected developments, we want you to know that we're moving forward with planning our wedding, which will reflect our values of honesty, mutual respect, and true family support. He turned to me. Ready to go. I nodded, suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation. As we prepared to leave, friends and relatives approached us with hugs and words of support. I'm so proud of you, Sophia whispered fiercely in my ear. That took incredible courage. Justin's parents engulfed us both in a warm embrace. Whatever you need, we're here, Robert assured us. As we made our way toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of my parents huddled with Natalie in the corner, their faces a mixture of anger and disbelief that their plans had backfired so spectacularly. The car ride home was quiet, both Justin and I processing the seismic shift that had just occurred in my family relationships. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks, a release of emotions too complex to articulate. Justin drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine tightly. You were amazing back there, he said softly. I've never been more proud to be marrying you. I can't believe I actually stood up to them, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. I've spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, and tonight I just stopped caring if I had it or not. Justin squeezed my hand. That's the thing about approval. When you stop needing it from the wrong people, you make space to receive it from the right ones. As we drove through the quiet Boston streets, I felt simultaneously broken and rebuilt, grieving what I had never truly had while embracing the authenticity of what lay ahead. The days following our engagement party passed in a blur of emotional processing and practical adjustments. As expected, my phone exploded with messages within hours of leaving the venue. Friends sent supportive texts, relatives called with mixed messages of shock and solidarity, and social media buzzed with veiled references to the dramatic evening. From my parents, there was only silence. 3 days passed without a single call or message, their absence speaking volumes about their inability to acknowledge what had transpired. Natalie, however, sent a barrage of angry texts, each one more accusatory than the last. You've always been jealous of me, one message read. Now you're trying to make Mom and Dad look bad, just because they recognize I need help right now. I didn't respond to her messages, instead focusing on rebuilding our wedding plans with the resources we actually had available. Justin and I sat down at our kitchen table with spreadsheets, and vendor quotes determined to create a celebration that reflected our love and values without going into debt. We could move the ceremony to the botanical gardens, Justin suggested. It's less expensive than the church and reception venue package we were looking at. And we could do a brunch reception instead of dinner, I added. Less alcohol, simpler menu, but still elegant. As we worked, an unexpected network of support began forming around us. Justin's parents called with a generous offer. "We'd like to contribute $5,000 toward your wedding," Elaine said when we met for coffee that weekend. "We had always planned to help, but after seeing how your parents handled things, we want to make our support clear." "That's incredibly generous," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "But we don't expect you to compensate for my parents' actions." "This isn't about compensating," Robert said firmly. "This is about celebrating our son and his wonderful fiancé. We're investing in your happiness, not fixing someone else's mistake." Friends stepped up in meaningful ways, too. Sophia, who worked at a luxury hotel, secured us a significant discount on a beautiful reception space. My colleague Daniel, a hobbyist photographer with impressive skills, offered to shoot our wedding as his gift. Another friend's cousin owned a catering company and provided a quote well below market rate after hearing our story. Meanwhile, I began seeing a therapist to process the complicated feelings surrounding my family relationships. Dr. Landon helped me navigate the grief of accepting my parents' limitations and the guilt that occasionally surfaced when I considered the possibility of them not attending my wedding. "Family estrangement is rarely a decision made lightly," she told me during one particularly difficult session. "It's usually the last resort after years of trying to make unhealthy relationships work. The question isn't whether you're doing the right thing by creating boundaries, but rather why it took a crisis for those boundaries to emerge." Those words resonated deeply as I examined the patterns of my childhood and young adult life. I had spent years contorting myself to fit my parents' expectations, accepting scraps of affection and approval, while watching Natalie receive abundance. The engagement party confrontation hadn't created the rift. It had simply exposed what had always existed beneath the surface. 3 weeks after the party, I received an unexpected letter from my father. Not an email or text, but an actual letter written on his personal stationery, delivered to our apartment mailbox. "Valeria," it began without any warm greeting. "Your mother and I have had time to reflect on the regrettable scene at your engagement celebration. While we maintain that our intentions regarding the wedding fund were based on pressing family needs, we acknowledge that the public announcement was perhaps ill-advised. We would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this matter privately as a family without the theatrical elements that characterized our last interaction. Please contact us to arrange a suitable time." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was an acknowledgement that something needed to be addressed, which was more than I had expected from my proud, image-conscious father. After discussing it with Justin and Dr. Landon, I agreed to a meeting at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant downtown. Justin insisted on accompanying me, a condition my parents reluctantly accepted. When we arrived at the restaurant, my parents were already seated, both looking immaculately groomed but strained around the eyes. Natalie was noticeably absent. "Thank you for coming," my mother said stiffly as we sat down across from them. "We felt it important to clear the air." "I appreciate that," I replied, maintaining eye contact despite the discomfort crackling between us. My father cleared his throat. "First, I want to say that we regret how things unfolded at the engagement party. Our announcement should have been handled differently." I noticed he was apologizing for the method, not the actual decision to take my wedding fund. "The public nature of our disagreement was unfortunate," my mother added. "It reflected poorly on all of us." Again, the focus was on appearances, rather than the betrayal of trust or the years of favoritism that had culminated in this moment. "I understand you're concerned about how things looked," I said carefully, "but I'm more concerned about what actually happened. You promised me something for 16 years, then took it away without discussion and gave it to Natalie as you've done with resources and attention throughout our lives." My father's jaw tightened. "That's an unfair characterization of our parenting. We've always supported both our daughters. Differently, I acknowledged. You've supported us very differently. Natalie has different needs, my mother said defensively. She's more sensitive, more artistic. The world is harder for her. The world isn't harder for her, Justin interjected gently. You've made it easier for her and harder for Valeria. My parents looked offended at his contribution, but I felt a surge of gratitude for his clear perspective. We're not here to rehash childhood grievances, my father said dismissively. We're here to find a path forward. Your wedding is approaching, and despite our differences, we're still your parents. Yes, you are, I agreed. And I would like you to be part of my wedding day, but that requires rebuilding trust and establishing some new boundaries. Boundaries, my mother repeated as if the word was foreign. Yes, I continued firmly. First, I need acknowledgement that taking my wedding fund without my consent was wrong regardless of Natalie's needs. Second, I need to know that if you attend our wedding, you'll be there to support our marriage, not to create drama or center yourselves. And third, I need you to respect that Justin and I are making our own decisions about our wedding and our life together. My parents exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with these direct terms. We can acknowledge that the situation could have been handled better, my father offered carefully. And of course, we support your marriage. It wasn't exactly what I had asked for, but it was something. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, circling around issues of family dynamics, expectations, and the wedding itself. By the end, we had reached what Dr. Landon would later call a negotiated peace, rather than a true reconciliation. My parents agreed to attend the wedding and contribute $3,000 toward it, a fraction of what they had originally promised, but a symbolic gesture nonetheless. I agreed to include them in certain traditional aspects of the day, like a father-daughter dance and family photos. We all agreed that Natalie's role would be limited to that of a regular guest, without any special recognition or responsibilities. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitantly asked, "Will you come to Sunday dinner next week? We could continue rebuilding." I looked at Justin, who gave me a supportive nod. "We can do that," I said, one step at a time. The weeks turned to months as we approached our adjusted wedding date. The planning process became a lesson in focusing on what truly mattered rather than the external trappings my parents had always emphasized. We created a celebration that reflected our values: connection over ostentation, sincerity over appearance, love over status. Natalie continued to hold her grudge, declining to help with any wedding preparations and making occasional passive-aggressive comments on social media about family loyalty. I found to my surprise that her disapproval affected me less and less as time passed. The actual wedding day dawned clear and perfect in early May sunshine spilling through the botanical garden's glass roof as I prepared with Sophia and my bridesmaids. My parents arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably as always. My mother offered a corsage to replace the one they had forgotten to order, while my father stood awkwardly with a forced smile. "You look beautiful," my mother said, and for once her words seemed sincere rather than evaluative. When the time came to walk down the aisle, I had made a decision that felt both painful and right. "Dad," I said quietly as the music began, "I've asked Robert to walk me down the aisle today. I hope you can understand." His face registered hurt before quickly composing itself. "Of course," he said stiffly. "It's your day." Justin's father had stepped into a supportive role throughout our engagement that my own father had never filled. Having him escort me felt like an acknowledgement of the family we were choosing rather than the one I had been born into. As Robert and I began our walk, I saw my parents seated in the front row, my father's expression stoic while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. 3 rows behind them sat Natalie, her face a mask of practiced indifference. And at the end of the aisle waited Justin, his eyes filled with tears and a smile that contained all the acceptance I had spent a lifetime seeking. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with vows we had written ourselves that promised partnership, respect, and growth. When the officiant pronounced us married, the garden erupted in genuine celebration from the people who truly wished us well. At the reception, my father fulfilled his obligation for our dance, moving stiffly to "What a Wonderful World," while maintaining polite conversation. "You've put together a lovely wedding," he commented, his tone suggesting surprise. "Thank you," I replied. "It's exactly what we wanted." Later, as Justin and I moved among our guests, Aunt Margaret pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you, Valeria," she said. "You've broken the cycle. Not everyone manages that." "What cycle?" I asked. "The one where we repeat our parents' patterns with our own children," she explained. "Diana did to you exactly what our parents did to her, favoring the younger child at the expense of the older. You're building something different." Her words stayed with me as the evening continued, a reminder that healing wasn't just about my past, but about my future. The family Justin and I would create together would be built on different foundations than the one I had grown up in. As we prepared to leave the reception amid sparklers and well-wishes, Justin leaned close to my ear. "Ready to start our real life, Mrs. Maxwell?" "More than ready," I replied, feeling the weight of my family history lifting as we stepped toward our future together. In the months that followed, we established new traditions with the family we had chosen. Sunday dinners alternated between Justin's parents' home and our apartment. Holidays became opportunities to create meaningful rituals rather than performances of perfection. We started a college fund for our future children with clear written guidelines about its purpose and protection. My relationship with my parents continued in a careful, limited fashion. They made occasional efforts that seemed genuine, though old patterns surfaced regularly and required firm boundaries. Natalie eventually reconciled with them, but maintained a cool distance from me, which honestly felt like a relief rather than a loss. Looking back now, I realize that the engagement party confrontation, painful as it was, gave me the greatest gift possible. Not the $15,000 I managed to save, but the freedom from seeking approval from people incapable of giving it unconditionally. It taught me that family isn't just about blood and obligation, but about choice and commitment. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead us exactly where we need to go, forcing us to confront truths we've been avoiding and embrace paths we might otherwise have been too afraid to take. My parents' public announcement about redirecting my wedding fund pushed me to redirect my life toward authenticity and true connection. What did your parents teach you about family loyalty? Have you ever had to choose between peace and honesty in your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born into. Like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you.